Damage is likely to be catastrophic. You were looking at the first video of debris and flooding from Typhoon Haiyan. These images were taken a short time ago in the city of Tacloban, which took a direct hit. The city has a population of 200,000 people. The U.S. Navy's Joint Typhoon Warning Center says the maximum sustained winds when the storm made landfall was 195 miles per hour, with gusts up to 235 miles per hour. Here's what the initial outer bands of rain and wind looked and sounded like in the streets of Tacloban. Now from out in the streets where the roofs are being ripped off to inside the shelters where so many people have been cowering in fear, this was recorded as the winds intensify. An estimated 2 million people live in this storm's danger zone, which is the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane, and hundreds of thousands of people lost their homes just a few weeks ago in an earthquake. In other words, they didn't have much protection to begin with tonight. On the phone right now is Joe Curry of Catholic Relief Services. He's in Bohol, Philippines, which has been feeling the effects of the typhoon for hours. Joseph, you're a little bit south and west of where the eye of the storm came into the Philippines, but nonetheless, what are you seeing? What are you feeling?
We've had a lot of strong rain and some wind here in the southern part of the island, and we have reports from the northern part, which was the earthquake-affected areas, that they have much stronger winds. Even some of the damaged houses have started falling down from the heavy winds.
Have you picked up anything from Tacloban, the city of 200,000 people that took a direct hit?
Not yet, not since this morning. Phones are off from the reports that we've had. We understand that the typhoon should be passing over now or passing over soon.
Give us a sense about infrastructure, and that one of the ways that that's so important as far as relief after a hurricane is to have roads that are essentially to be able to be cleared so that people can get in. What sort of infrastructure does the central part of the Philippines have to deal with this?
This is mainly islands here. Islands, some with airports, some without. Leyte is an island of about 1.5 million people. The coastal areas are low-lying. It has an airport, but it's also mainly connected by rural roads. It's not highways. Bridges could be affected by flooding. We'll have to see what happens, but based on what we've seen in other storms of similar intensity, and this is the strongest we've seen, we could have bridges out, we could have tens of thousands of houses damaged or destroyed.
And again, we're talking about a region affected here with 2 million people. Do you share the fear that this was a catastrophe?
Absolutely. This is such a strong storm. In this part of the world, houses are fragile, infrastructure is relatively fragile. We'll have to see how people can stand up, but the government's been conducting mass evacuations, and we hope that there's been enough preparedness in place.
Joe Curry of Catholic Relief Services from Bohol, Philippines. Joe, thanks for riding out the storm and talking to us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Stevenson is here. And Rebecca, where is the super typhoon now, and where's it headed?
Well, right now, David, we're still seeing the storm right over the Philippine Islands. And we're talking about catastrophic damage from the storm because, well, let's think back to when we had a very powerful storm. We think about Hurricane Katrina. Well, that made landfall only as a Category 2. We've got to go back to 1980 to Hurricane Allen or 1969 to Hurricane Camille to see sustained winds making landfall in the U.S. at 190 miles an hour. And now we're talking about a storm hitting the Philippines, far less developed, very low in elevation. And we're looking at these winds developing to 195 miles an hour, sustained, blowing consistently over landfall. Now, as it moved on shore, the friction of the wind into the land did aid it in slowing slightly, but we still have that potential for wind gusts up to 200 miles an hour. The radar is showing us that we have intense rainfall here. We expect to see about generally 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with the storm, but much higher amounts up to a foot in the mountains. And the mountains is where we're going to see that heavy rain cause flooding and also mudslides, which is the primary reason for death toll in the Philippines from typhoons. So as we look at this storm, we know that it's going to really pack a punch. The track tonight, as it tracks off to the west, is going to be gradually, slowly, about 4 a.m. our time, Eastern Standard Time, to finally get on the other side, the west side of the Philippine Islands. And then as we move forward a little bit more in time, we're going to see the Philippines continue to get the back edge of this storm by noon tomorrow. So they will not be completely done with it by tomorrow afternoon. But by the time we get to tomorrow night, it's going to be gearing up to hit Vietnam. So we're talking about some powerful winds, and we have some video to look at some of these strong winds that people are enduring. And when we keep in mind that at land surface, at the ground level, those winds are very strong, and we expect them to be sustained 100 to 150 miles an hour. However, if you go up in height, as you can see, some of these buildings are quite high. They're only getting the even more powerful wind gusts and strong winds.
Rebecca, we had hoped to talk to somebody in the city of Tacloban, 200,000. They got the storm first. We can't reach anybody there. And in fact, the people we can reach and the rest of the Philippines and Manila, they can't reach anybody. The biggest danger in the storm, is it from the wind initially knocking out power lines and therefore there's no contact? Is it from the flooding? What's the biggest concern?
Well, the biggest concern, again, the highest death toll is usually caused by flooding and mudslides within these particular kinds of storms. But when we go to a Category 5, I think we're going to see a lot more damage, as you were saying, from the wind taking the power lines down initially. But then we have to consider the storm surge that was just north of the eye wall as it made landfall, and that stretched much farther north than the eye. And we expect those to see that storm surge estimate. It was anywhere from 10 to 20 feet. And so when we see the final summary of what that storm surge actually was, I think that flooding is going to be a very large part of the problem here.
As a reporter who has covered this, sometimes there's a window of opportunity when the eye makes landfall because suddenly the winds die down, the rain stops, and that's when you feed your tape and you're able to make contact with your news agencies. How quickly is the storm moving? In other words, what would have the window been in case somebody wanted to suddenly try to make a satellite phone call or whatnot out from an area that was hardest hit?
First of all, I would never recommend that. That's always the time when people are caught by surprise, is going in the eye of the storm, because that back edge comes in so quickly. And this storm is a fast mover, and it's moving at about 30 miles an hour. So at least that will help lessen some of the flooding.
All right, Rebecca Stevenson.